Okay, so this is the time of year when we sing a lot of Christmas carols. And I'm a little bit curious as to what your favorites are. A little bit of Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas, or more Joy to the World. Well, the oldest Christmas song is the one you just heard. Although the tune might be a little bit different than what it was originally, the words to that last hymn are what we call Mary's song, or the Magnificat, or magnifier, because she talks about how her soul magnifies God. Now, after the angel appeared to Mary, we don't even know what that looked like, by the way, but we do know that after the angel appeared, Mary went to go visit her cousin Elizabeth. And now Elizabeth was much older than she was, but she was also very pregnant. And when Mary showed up on Elizabeth's doorstep, which was quite a journey, by the way, so Mary traveled a lot while pregnant, the poor thing. But when she showed up at Elizabeth's house, the baby that Elizabeth was carrying jumped. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen your parents pregnant or some friends, other adults in your family pregnant, but when a baby jumps, sometimes you can see it, but you can definitely feel it. And I don't know if your parents or grandparents or guardians are this way with you, but sometimes they just know, right? They just know something is happening with you even when maybe you don't. Well, that's how it was with Elizabeth. She knew, because of the way her baby was moving around, that it was trying to tell her that there was something very special about Mary's baby. So when she told Mary, Mary was so glad about this news and so excited to tell her cousin Elizabeth about everything that she couldn't help from singing. But it was kind of a strange song, wasn't it? I'm going to read it again so you can hear it a little bit better. And Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely, from now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise that he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever." So that's it. That's the oldest Christmas song that we have. Now, I don't know about you, but it's not exactly what I think about when I think about Christmas carols. I tend to think of things like Away in a Manger or Silent Night, things that tend to be more about the baby and the stable or angels and shepherds. But that's not what Mary talks about at all. So I want you to think about that for just a minute. Think about your parent or guardian or best friend, whoever it is that knows you the very best. Mary was that person for Jesus. In fact, throughout his life, we even have stories about how she knew him maybe even better than he knew himself. And here, when she's trying to explain to Elizabeth about what this all means, what Jesus' birth brings us, she talks about feeding the hungry and lifting up the marginalized, the people that society often forgets. Now, this week in Bible study, when we were talking about this passage, it brought up a lot of things for us. Why, in particular? Why do we need Jesus? Why God in human form? How does he do these things? And how did Mary know? So to help us think about how Jesus does that, lifts up the lowly and feeds the hungry, and to think about why he was born, I want to tell you a Christmas story. This is Pageant Sunday, sort of, after all. So instead of a sermon, I want to tell you about a man named Bill. Bill was a dreamer. He was a creative type, a sculptor, an inventor, and he was an amateur naturalist. And he heard from some of his friends who were scientists that there was a bird that was going almost extinct, the whooping crane, They had been overhunted and the climate had changed on their migration patterns, you know, the trip they always make to go south in the winter, and they were dying very quickly. At one point, there had been only 16 left, 16. Now, scientists could hatch more baby birds. They could help them make more baby chicks, and some of those birds could be added to the one flock that existed. But they needed to start a new flock so that there would be more than one group of these birds left for diversity and in case something happened. But those baby birds, they would need to learn to fly south to survive. Now, I'm simplifying a little bit here, but that's mostly correct. So they could hatch the birds, but they wouldn't survive because they didn't know how to fly, much less that they were supposed to fly south. Not only that, if the scientists hatched the birds would think that people were their friends and they wouldn't be afraid of people. And people were some of the biggest problems why these birds were going extinct. So nobody knew what to do about these birds until one night, in the middle of the night, Bill woke up from a dream with an idea. And this is true. He got up, he was so excited. In the middle of the night, he woke up his kids and he told them what he was going to do. And they rolled their eyes and probably said, "Dad," and went back to sleep. But he got up the next morning and he got started. And the very first thing he did was set to work making a very fancy bird costume. A bit like Big Bird, really, but shaped like the cranes that he was trying to save. It was just the right size for him. And then he set to work making a very special, very tiny and quiet airplane that would fly about the same speed as the birds, 30 to 40 miles an hour. It couldn't be big, just big enough for him. Now this was pretty hard because it meant that a plane that small is going to be very susceptible to wind, so it took him a long time to design the right plane that was small enough and strong enough and flew at just the right speed and was gliding on the current sometimes. So then, after those two things were done, he set about running a motorcycle next to the eggs before they hatched so that the chicks wouldn't be too scared of the sound of an engine. And finally, as they started to hatch, he put on the costume so he would be the very first thing they saw. They would think he was their parent and they would follow him. They would never see another person in a fancy bird costume like that, so he didn't have to worry about them becoming accustomed to humans. So he spent all their baby days with them, showing them where to find food, what to look for, what to watch out for. And then he had to teach them how to fly. That's right. Baby birds have to learn how to fly. Essentially, Bill showed them how to be birds. And then the time came. And I'm guessing he was a bit sad, because if you spend enough time with those babies, you're gonna really love them. But he says he tried really hard not to get to know them too well, but it was hard. It was a sacrifice, and it was one he knew he had to make. So he suited up one morning, put on his fancy bird suit, and climbed that fancy bird suit into his plane, and they started a 1,200-mile journey from Wisconsin to Florida. It took them 49 days to make it the whole way because of the way the plane flew, but eventually they made it. And he snuck away, and he took off his bird suit, and he went home, knowing that from then on, they could do it on their own. When Mary found out she was pregnant, she sang a Christmas carol about God feeding the hungry and overturning the powerful. Because God, well, she knew God was about to put on a person suit, so that in the midst of all the poverty and all the destruction, all those things that like the birds were killing us from the inside and out, well, God in the person suit could teach us how to be human once again. Who would think that what was needed was a baby? Well, God and Mary, and if you listen to his dreams, maybe Bill, and maybe now us too. Thanks be to God.